Now for prosecuting attorney, first Autumn Ferch.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Autumn Ferch, and I am running for Starke County Prosecuting Attorney. After graduating from Knox High School, I continued my education at Valparaiso University, where I received my law degree. I returned to Starke County and worked as a deputy prosecuting attorney for 7 years. Since 2019, I have been the attorney for the city of Knox, and I have worked in 4 counties as a public defender. By starting my career as a prosecutor and then working in these other counties as a public defender, I not only know the role of the prosecutor, but I have had the opportunity to experience different ways of handling cases, and I have learned new ideas to incorporate into the prosecutor's office to help the office run more efficiently. Since returning to Starke County, I have been active in my community. I am the president of the City of Knox Park Board. I sit on the Knox Community School Board and the Starke County Economic Development Board. I am also a member of Our Redeemer Lutheran Church, where I teach Sunday school and volunteer to assist various committees within the church. I mention these things because it's important for elected officials to be active, involved members of the community where they live, so they are in touch with the people they represent and they can listen to the needs of those individuals. I have devoted my time and my talents to these boards to help serve our community. I view the position of prosecutor not only as a job, but as a calling, where I can continue my public service in a more impacting way. The prosecutor is the top public safety official in the county. The prosecutor sets the tone for the criminal justice system. As your Starke County prosecutor, I will set a tone of strength, respect, and professionalism. I have learned over the years that if a prosecutor wants a solid, prosecutable case, they must spend the time and put forth the effort to hold officer training sessions to ensure that all officers are up to date on all new laws, that they have the resources they need and the support they deserve. I will prioritize partnerships within our community with the stakeholders to improve the public safety crisis our county is in. I will work with law enforcement to hold criminals accountable, support victims, and make Starke County a safer place. I assure you, if elected, cases will be reviewed in a timely manner, law enforcement will be supported, victims will be communicated with, and you, the members of Starke County, will be protected. It would be an honor and a privilege to serve you, the county I grew up in and remain loyal to. I would appreciate your support.
Our other candidate, Leslie Baker.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Baker, and I'm the current Starke County prosecutor. I wanted to take an opportunity to thank the Chamber, WKBI, the leader, and everyone else involved with this event for organizing this and giving us all an opportunity to stand before you and to speak to members of the community, both here and who are listening or going to watch this on YouTube at a later time. And I want to thank you all for being here and sticking with us until the end. I never like being the last one because hopefully everyone's still awake. I've been in practice of law for 8.5 years. My first 4.5 years in practice, I was in private practice, and I dealt with all kinds of arenas of the law. I did criminal law, I did probate, I did family law, I did other civil issues, and I practiced in multiple counties from Pulaski to Fulton, all over the place in northern Indiana. For almost 4 years, I've been in the prosecutor's office. I have a family. I'm married to Ryan, and we have 2 children, Max, who's 10, and Molly, who's actually 8 today. So she's kind of been with me since the beginning. I can recall having case files in the hospital with me when she was born. Since taking on the role of prosecutor, I've worked to build a solid team. I work with some of the greatest people in the world. The people in my office work with me to brainstorm cases, to talk through cases from victim issues to legal issues to practical things that may be overlooked. We just work very well together, and that's probably one of a great accomplishment of mine, is building a solid team who can support me and support the other prosecutors in my office to get the job done. With myself and the rest of my office, we've instituted better internal practices with regard to our case filings and utilizing evidence-based decision-making practices in terms of bond issues, as well as resolution of cases ultimately. We believe in working, and when I say we, I mean my team, we believe in working with our law enforcement officers to put together quality cases. We believe in working with our schools and our SROs across the county on issues like Project Attend and other issues within the schools. And we've brought more accountability to our pretrial diversion program to include programming and greater supervision for people who are participating in that program. And to go ahead and answer the question about what would I do going forward. I think one of the biggest things I want to implement going forward is this idea of greater communication with law enforcement. One of the things that we try to do, and we still do, are that offer an educational opportunity, are no-pros memos, and having those one-on-one conversations with law enforcement with regard to why we make filing decisions that we do that sometimes law enforcement may not be in agreement with. What I would like to see happen, and what we could be better at, are doing case reviews and quarterly meetings with our law enforcement community to include leadership as well as the officers to bring their cases to us, whether it's a hypothetical case or it's an actual case where we can talk about why we made the decision we did and what's missing and what could be improved upon or what could be added or what piece of information was missing. I'd also like to start a program where we shadow a prosecutor. Do law enforcement officers know what goes on in the prosecutor's office? Probably not. Just like we don't know what it's like to work the road. So kind of a tag-along program for both law enforcement officers to come to the prosecutor's office and see those discussions that happen within those four walls, as well as allowing prosecutors to do a ride-along with the officers to see what you deal with on a nightly basis when you're dealing with that incorrigible person. And finally, one of the things that I think that I would really like to implement in working with our law enforcement leadership is Coffee with a Cop, where we move around throughout the county to be more visible to the community and to work together to bring that visibility for children, members of the community to voice their concerns. So they don't have to wait until the next election to voice their concern, but they have an opportunity to do so in those public settings. I appreciate everyone being here this evening, and I appreciated your support 4 years ago, and I would ask that you all support me in the upcoming election in November. Thank you.
Okay, Leslie, you addressed your accomplishments and also what you would do differently. Autumn, if you are elected to the prosecutor's office, what would you do differently?
A few of the things that I would like to focus on initially doing differently would be the Project Attend. Project Attend is important to ensure that our students in all of our school corporations are attending school on a regular basis, and that they are getting to school on time. As of right now, attendance in our schools is not at a great level. I recently heard that in one of our schools, 17% of the students had missed more than 3 weeks of school already, and we are only in October. So we have not been in school long enough for 17% of our students to have already missed 3 weeks. To me, that's a problem. Project Attend needs to be more heavily enforced, and the prosecutor's office needs to be working with the school corporations to ensure that the families have what they need to get the children to school and the resources they need. Next, as I previously stated, the communication and the collaboration amongst the police and the prosecutors and all of the community stakeholders is something that that definitely needs to be improved upon. And another issue that has recently been addressed to me is bus drivers are having issues with people driving around their stop arms. And that is an issue that needs to be addressed before something tragic happens in our community. And it is the job of the prosecutor's office to work well with either the SROs or the law enforcement agencies to make sure that those issues can be addressed and we do not have a tragedy in our community.
Leslie, question for you. You had an idea of what being a prosecutor was before you became a prosecutor. What's been some of your biggest surprises since you've become a prosecutor? Do you understand the nature of the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest surprises that I've encountered since taking on this responsibility and this role is this idea that the prosecutor's office can fix everything. To piggyback on something Ms. Ferch just said about school attendance. Project Attend is a very important program that the prosecutor's office is involved with, definitely. But it's also a program that involves the Indiana Department of Child Services, which is, I think, an important piece. The Indiana Department of Child Services is also a partner within that program, and in these Project Attend meetings, they are a person who comes to the table to discuss those issues, just like juvenile probation. And so when we're talking about, in terms of the surprises about how you deal with this programming, well, you also, when you're integrating not just one, office, but multiple agencies into a program to try to solve problems, every different agency has their own rules, such as the Indiana Department of Child Services has their own rules about when they can step in and when they can't, and what they can do and what they can't. And that also applies to the prosecutor's office as well. When we talk about the importance of school attendance, there comes a role that the schools play in terms of attendance policy and absences. And so there's a lot of things that you would think that you can easily fix. And then when you get into the position, it's not so easily fixed because it doesn't fall entirely on your shoulders. And so that would be one thing that I think is very much of a surprise. But beyond that, most of what I expected the position to be is what it's been.
This is a question for both of you. It might not have been a bad question for the sheriff's candidates. The law requiring Hoosiers to carry gun permits was repealed as of July 1. What impact, if any, will it have on the prosecutor's office?
I think the biggest impact that that has on the prosecutor's office is taking the time to educate the police officers on how to apply that law. They have been trained from the beginning the exact opposite of what this new law now is allowing. And so it is the role of the prosecutor to take the time to prepare officer training sessions so every officer knows exactly what they need to do when they now are interacting with people who now have a firearm.
I would agree with what Ms. Ferch said in terms of doing the training to make sure that law enforcement is prepared to deal with that change in law, which is why we do, on an annual basis, when the legislature makes changes to the law, we do those trainings with our law enforcement officers, and we make those available to all of our agencies to attend whatever session works for them. We usually plan between 4 to 6 sessions to take into consideration the officers' schedules. And so we give those opportunities to law enforcement agencies to make sure they can come and hear those presentations and be up to date with changes in the law.
You've both been defense attorneys. You've both been in the prosecutor's office in some way, shape, or form. What do you do if you have a former client that's a suspect that was one of your former clients? You're going to shove it off to a different county. What are you going to do with that particular suspect? Let's see. Leslie, I think it's your turn to go first.
I'm gonna make sure I got it.
Yes.
I think the biggest thing to keep in mind when you are a defense attorney, especially when you live in a small town, is we all know each other, or we know a lot of general things about each other. And those attorney-client relationships are precious. They're very precious. And if I was in a situation where a former client was the suspect in a case, obviously if they're a suspect in a case, and my responsibility to that client has been terminated, which in the role of prosecutor it has been terminated, and while what was privileged, what was said to me during my representation of that client is obviously privileged, the relationship going forward isn't necessarily a conflict per se. I think it would depend on the situation. I think it would depend on how old the relationship is. And if they're a suspect in a crime, they're not necessarily somebody you're charging yet, so it gets to be a little bit more complicated. It gets to be complicated. But if in my opinion, if the suspect turns out to be somebody who is going to turn into a potential criminal defendant, then I think it's appropriate, and it's probably better safe than sorry, because when you talk about attorney ethics and things that can get you in trouble with regard to your law license, it's probably safer to turn that over to a special prosecutor for purposes of an investigation, and then to potentially file a criminal case.
I would agree with what she said. If it's a suspect and I would not have any involvement in the details of the case, then it would not be an issue until it became an issue. And I think at that point in time, if there was a conflict, it is appropriate to assign a special prosecutor, and if charges are filed, definitely a special prosecutor would need to be appointed to prevent any conflict or any appearance of favoritism.
There have been some issues between the prosecutor's office and law enforcement organizations. Going forward, what is your plan for trying to rectify that situation? Autumn, it's your turn to go first.
I think to rectify that situation, it is to start off on the clean slate. Start off having meetings with all departments, everyone being on the same page. There being training for all of the departments, so the departments would know what the expectations are of them from the prosecutor's office. I think that is the best way to start out. And if there are conflicts that arise along the way, I think it's best to talk face-to-face, talk one-on-one, work through those problems. Don't let it sit, don't let it grow. Address it immediately, fix the situation. We all have a job to do. We all have to work together, and Starke County will not function properly if all agencies are not working together. And that is what our county needs. Thank you.
I don't disagree with Ms. Ferch with regard to clean slate. In fact, I think clean slates are very important for lots of reasons. But I think that it's important that when you have a clean slate and you're establishing expectations with leadership, that leadership also hold their officers accountable to the expectations you set forth as prosecutor. And so it's not just expectations with a group of 4 people. It's an expectations with a group that's much larger than that. And if you don't have an understanding of expectations across the board from the top on down, then it doesn't work. And I think that that is something that I would like to work on with whoever takes on the role of sheriff. I think that that would be a great way to start off once the new sheriff's candidate gets their feet wet and comes into office on January 1st. To start off